Let's do it. Okay, well, welcome again, everybody. All our Academy of Emerging Leaders participants. You've gone through almost the whole program. I think you just have, you only had the preparing for oral interviews class left. And as I sent you an email, Tim was the trainer on that, and the person who was going to take over is unable to do it. So we provided you with a couple ways to do that. If you didn't get the email or you're confused by it, please reach out to me, Deanna Robinson, or hcdtraining@hcd.ca.gov. So again, thank you for being here. This morning, we're going to be talking to, we should have 4 supervisors. So far, I can only see 3, but it's possible that I'm just missing the last person. And I'll make sure I check on that. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a panel of these supervisors who are going to answer questions. I have a set amount of questions that I'm going to put out there. But then you will have an opportunity at the end to ask your own questions. So some of the things we're going to talk about are things like, you know, what has inspired them or what motivates them, some challenges and roadblocks, and some skills and knowledge and things like that. So some questions that we think might be important, good and bad. I used to teach a class on called "Are You Ready to Lead?" and we talked about like the differences between supervisors and managers and lead people. So we called it the good, the bad, and the ugly, because there's a little bit of everything. And congratulations to a couple of you who have already gotten promotions. So hopefully the Academy was a part of that. But I'm glad you're still coming to the classes. So today we are going to be talking to Douglas Strong from Housing Policy Division, Lisa Lane from the Organizational Development Division, Chanel Hano from the Division of Federal Financial Assistance, and Melinda Wetzel of Administration and Management. She's actually in HR. So what I thought we could do is have each of them introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll move on to the questions. So Douglas, would you like to go first?
Yeah, good morning. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Dr. Strong. I'm currently the SSM2, overseeing the Fair Housing Unit, including the Tribal Fair Unit. And I've been with HCD for maybe roughly 6.5 years, starting at a Rep 1. Actually, I started at Rep 1 in the admin unit. Again, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to answer any question you may have. Thank you. You are muted, Dina, I think.
I am muted. See, I'm so bad about that because I forget I put myself on mute. Thank you for that. Okay, well, let's talk to Lisa Lane next. Lisa. Oh, now you're muted.
All right, there we go. Okay, it's just like COVID just happened. So thank you for inviting me to participate in this today. This is awesome. There's not a lot of opportunities that we get to mingle across divisions, and I'm really glad to be able to see a lot of other divisions here that we can, this is the only way we can build community within HCD. So I have been with HCD for about 3 years. I started as an AGPA, had lots of experience outside of the state, but just was ready for a change. And I now manage the unit that I was hired in, and then I had to hire my replacement, and have really loved it. So it's been really a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next, we're going to talk to Chanel. Chanel.
Good morning. My name is Chanel Hano. I am the section chief in the Federal Operations and Support Services section on the federal side of the house. I've been here since 2019 when we were just DFA, right? It was pre-bifurcation, so there was just one division for federal and state financial assistance. And then we bifurcated a few years ago, and I was able to move over to the federal. So I share Lisa's sentiment in that this is very exciting because we don't get to mingle, if you will. So excited to be here and answer any questions.
Thank you. And last, we have, not but not least, we have Melinda.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes?
Good morning. Likewise, I share the same sentiments as Lisa and Chanel. Myself, I have only been with HCD since September 2023. I'm currently the section chief over the personnel operations section in our human resources branch. I have been with the state for 15 years. I've been in HR for 26, private and in-state. So I started out with the Department of Rehabilitation as a student assistant, and worked my way up to the section chief there before coming to HCD. So I am very excited to be here, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Melinda. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. So I'm going to ask a question. I'll put it up on the screen for all of you guys to see, and then for the presenter to also see, but I'll say it. And then we'll have like one or two of them answer the question, and then we'll move on to the next one. So however feels comfortable answering it, just speak up and you can go ahead and do that. So let me share the screen again, and I got to find my PowerPoint. There we go. Okay. All right, I need to do this. Every time I do this, by the way, it usually does it the wrong way. So if it's looking funny, let me know. Sometimes I don't see it, but you guys, if you have two screens, it changes its mind of where it wants to be. Okay, so our first question is going to be, what is the one thing you wish you knew before you started as a supervisor? Anybody want to take that one on?
Yeah, I can actually take that questions. Yeah, so short answer, right? It's a lot of admin work, right? A lot of admin and personnel work, right? Because sometimes when you talk to your manager, supervisor, you do not see that the amount of personal or admin work that they do behind the scene, because all you see them is like, hey, they give you a task, they check up on, like they do one-on-one meeting with you, they provide you feedback, all of those things, right? But on the back end, the supervisor or manager, we do keep like, file. We want to make sure that, and we have more than one person that we overseeing, right? So there's the amount of like the admin work is what I'm, that's, I wish I knew that in advance when becoming a manager, because, you have your own tasks, right, to complete. You also have your staff to kind of overseeing, and you also have that admin work that you also need to keep up as well. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Anybody else any of the other supervisors, managers want to answer that?
So, I mean, even as staff, you have a lot of meetings, right? Everyone has meeting after meeting, but as a manager, it seems to be just a lot. And so as a staff person, you see all the managers going to the meetings, right? You have a hard time getting a hold of your manager sometimes because they're always in meetings, but you don't realize the amount and what that takes until you're at that level of being in meetings almost all day long, and then trying to find the time for, like Douglas said, the admin work or just your work, right? Because we all have desk work too. So I think that just that time commitment of non-desk work, non-admin work, just meetings is just, it's a lot. So I think, we've taken steps in our division to try to reduce meetings and combine meetings, right? And have grace periods in between to kind of mitigate that, but meetings, that's it.
I've heard that before, so lots of
Deanna, to piggyback off of that as well, just some tips. I've always worked in an administrative side, so I already had a notion of what the admin responsibilities. So it's good to hear it from the program side, because I think that's not always discussed or addressed. But one thing that has helped me with the admin related responsibilities, and the meetings like Chanel mentioned, yes, like when you start climbing the ladder in the state, especially with the pandemic, it's perceived that you're always available. So those meetings are going to constantly keep coming, right? And so it's managing your time well and making sure that your team feels that no matter that they see you busy, that you will circle back and find a way to meet with them. So what helps me is for the admin related responsibilities, I will block early on in my schedule in my day. Because a lot of people don't want to attend meetings from 8 to 9, right? Because you're just starting, you're just getting your coffee, you're getting situated. I block a time to do my admin responsibilities. But if I do notice my work week where I'm having back-to-back meetings, I will schedule office hours so that my, subordinate managers or staff feel if they need me for something, that I can make that time slot for them and be available. So just some tips of if that helps in terms of like time management.
Thank you. And I did forget to say, if you do have a question that's related to what, question we just asked or want something to be expanded on, please feel free to speak up or raise your hand. I'll try to catch the hands, but I'm not used to facilitating. I've been doing the coordinator work for so long. So you'll probably start seeing me a little bit more now that we don't have money to be sending people to training. So I will be helping out with that. I do have a background in it, but I'm not used to doing it. So please forgive me if I miss you. So, okay. Does anybody have any questions, or shall we move on to our next question? I think we're going to move on. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Next question. What percentage of your time, this actually goes on with it. So how much time do you think you're spending on administrative work and then your actual workload? And maybe describe the type of administrative work you're required to complete. So obviously Tim designed these questions because he probably knew that there is a lot there. So I see Lisa has her hand up. Lisa's under OD team, if you see that, because she's part of the organizational development team. So Lisa, why don't you take a stab at this one?
Oh, sorry if my icon is up there and not my face.
You're there.
Yeah, I didn't want to jump in on the, because we all know that administrative tasks take so much time, but this was a really interesting question to me, because if your team is running smoothly, then you've got plenty of time for meetings. If you have individuals that you're managing, or somehow the team is not working really well together, then it becomes really overwhelming about the extra work. And that's, I think, the hardest part to me about the supervisory level is, if things are challenging, you're putting in those extra hours regardless. It might be at 7 o'clock at night or whatever, right? So it's sometimes it's great, sometimes it is challenging.
Thank you. Isn't there something about the 80-20 rule, right? You spend 20% of your 80% of your time on 20% of either the work or the people.
Exactly.
Does anybody else, any of our other managers, want to take a stab at this and the percentage of time they spend and what type of work?
Yeah, I can add to what Lisa's saying, right? If you have a great team, I agree. Yeah, I think that it's just minimum work, admin work. If you have a team or have an individual that's struggling with work or performing, and that's where you put extra time. And I'm talking about extra, almost sometimes 20-hour extra per week, just to keep up, just kind of work with the individual, bring them to where they should be, and so yeah, I think it depends on your team. It depends on how well your team is functioning. Yeah, so it play a big role into the percentage of how much you put in, right? A great team, I think, very minimal. You know, if staff is struggling to perform or their duties, I think we're putting way more time than the norm, in my opinion.
All right, oh, Melinda, I see your hands up. You want to add to that?
Yeah, some things to keep in mind too is you're managing the work and leading the people, right? So when you're leading the people, like Lisa said, and the team is smooth, knowing their expectations, knowing what their requirements are to achieve success in their role, it does help your leadership, excel. But keep in mind, like some of the descriptions of admin work that we do is, when you're supervising staff, you're reviewing timesheets, you're ensuring that, if you have a staff that's out on FMLA or there's, reasonable accommodation, there's admin related paperwork for that. If you're conducting a hire, you're recruiting, there's admin, you have to make sure that you're developing your screening criteria, interview questions. And, so there is like admin related functions to that perspective that can be time consuming. Or if you do, have a problem employee that you're, progressively, working with them on their performance, those type of things, that can take a lot of your admin related functions from you. But again, it's, starting off in a leadership role is never easy. And the staff services manager 1 level, I will be completely transparent and honest, it is the hardest working level management position in the state. You're not only supervising staff, you are a working level manager. So you're going to have your own workload on top of managing your staff's workload. So keep those things in mind that, work-life balance is always a plus. Keeping the positivity is, finding, an avenue that works best, and setting those expectations and goals for your team at the forefront. I think that will help serve a little bit of those relative admin responsibilities and easing them off your desk a little bit. So.
Thank you. All right, so does anybody have any questions regarding this topic? And please feel free to type it in the chat if you're uncomfortable speaking up. However, I'm sure all these managers are going to tell you, if you really do want to become a leader or, a manager, you have to get comfortable with speaking up. All right, we have a question from Kelsey.
Melinda, so you did mention the work-life balance and that, when you are a staff services manager 1, you are responsible for a lot of the work. And we've heard that you sometimes have to do, extra work beyond the hours that you typically would work. How would you and anyone else on the panel recommend doing or keeping that kind of work-life balance so that you're not, burning the candle at both ends and burning yourself out? What recommendations would you have for us on how to do that successfully?
That's a good question, Kelsey. And I can answer based on, so I've been in management since 2017. I was a staff services manager 1 for a few years, and I didn't find myself, and again, this is when I was working at Department of Rehabilitation, not HCD. So departments vary in terms of like operation and things like that. But what helped me stay balanced when I was a 1, that I can count on my hands, that I may have 7 to 8 times in the few years I was a 1, I worked beyond my 8 hours, was because my team was strong. My team was very well in their performance, their understanding of the work, the expectations of the work. And I worked really, really hard when I first became a 1 to work on that, setting those expectations. Yes, communication, Lisa, is a huge component. Transparency. I always was transparent with rank and file staff. I always let them know that leadership is great. Will it come with sacrifice? Of course. But what helped me with the work-life balance was I wanted to mirror that way for my staff, to let them know that leadership is not scary. So if I can't work within my 8 hours, then I need to do better in assessing my work and figuring out what I needed to do to prioritize and be consistent with that as well. So if your team is not functioning cohesively and harmonious, that's going to create ripples. You're going to have a lot of, situations where you may be burning that candle. Hopefully not. Like, the best advice I can give as a leader is, if you have effective communication, you are transparent with your staff, you have expectations and goals and shared goals. I think that's really important too, is as leaders, yes, it's our expectation, again, to manage the work and making sure that it gets done. But how we effectively do that, that's the important piece of, we're dealing with humans first. You have to put that humanistic component to that as well. And letting, people know your ideas are safe to share, that we're heavily into collaboration, process improvements. Don't be stagnant with the status quo, and really heighten that for your team. And I think that may help with the work-life balance, because if they feel empowered to do their job well, that's going to lessen your responsibility to manage that job.
Thank you. And I see that we have several hands up. I know Douglas wants to add to it and Chanel wants to add to it. So I will have them add, and then I'll get to you, Frank, and you, Tyler. Okay.
Okay.
All right, Douglas, go ahead.
Yeah, so just quickly, I think it is hard when you are promoted within the same team. Say you were a rep 2 and then you became an SSM 1 in the same team, right? So a lot of time when you become a manager 1, it is very hard to let your rep 2 work go, right? You're still doing all of those work because you're so used to it, right? So I think the one thing that I've learned is to let things go, right? To delegate your work. You need to delegate the rep 2 work to the rep, and you do your SSM 1 work, right? I think that's the key. If you once you become a manager 1 and you're still doing the rep work, you will always be that working manager that keep pushing, try to meet deadlines, and you will 100% go over your 8 hours a day, right? So I think find a balance, to delegate, right? To coach, your staff, and then delegate those work to them, and let them, trust them to do the work, right? And of course, you work with them and improve their skills at the same time. So again, I think that's the key for me, when I was a manager 1.
Doug, you answered that like you know me and know what I'm going to struggle with.
That's funny. Okay, Chanel, you want
My
to?
boss.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm going to be honest. I never found it as a 1. I never found the balance. I never found how to make it work and not burn at both ends. But I think that lesson helped me as a 2, right? Because I prioritize that for my managers. I want them to have that work-life balance. I encourage it, right? HCD will be here tomorrow, and nothing is more important than your life, your family, the things that are happening outside of work. And I try to have that role to their staff as well, right? Encourage their teams to have that work-life balance too, because it's all about setting boundaries, right? Start time, end time, try not to go past those times as a manager, even as, subordinate staff with overtime and all that good stuff, but as a manager too, right? Making sure that we are starting when we say we're going to start and we're ending when we say we're going to end, and trying to stick to that. I'm really bad at sending emails after hours, but I'm trying to lead by example and not do that, because when your managers get those emails, even though they shouldn't be looking at their phones either, they feel pressured to respond, right? So I'm always trying to say, hey, this is not a now thing. This is not a today thing. Respond tomorrow when you have a chance. But I try not to do that because, again, you want to do a good job for your boss, right? So I know that if they have the answer, they'll want to respond immediately. But it was really difficult as a 1 for me. I was a 1 at a different department that ran very differently than HCD. It was more like private sector. So balance was not encouraged. Work was your life. So it was really difficult to find that at my last department. But I'm really thankful at HCD that we encourage that here as a department, right? Not just as in our divisions and our silos, like as a department, it's a really important concept for everyone. So very thankful to be in a department that values that. But yeah, it was really difficult as a 1, and I hate to be like the Debbie Downer, right? Because everyone's like, you can do it. You can do it. I just didn't. But completely transparent, right?
Thank you. All right, Frank, do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I wanted to direct a specific question to Lisa Lane, if I could.
Sure.
Hi, Lisa. This is Frank Ferreira in Codes and Standards.
Hi.
And, I have a specific question for you, and I think you probably can answer it very well. What do you use, or what technique do you use to foster employee engagement? I'm sure probably you've run across this before in your unit. What techniques do you usually use to engage your team members?
That's a great question. And actually, one of the things that I've learned this year in being a SSM1 was to keep my mind open and always keep learning, right? So I was having trouble with my team, and I shared that with some others, and they gave me some good feedback. And so what I've done recently, especially to build a new team, is what we've been doing for engagement is we have like what we call a 15-minute stand-up 2 to 3 times a week. And we connect and we just say, hey, how's it going today? What are your challenges? What are your priorities? You know, check in on, oh, you're not feeling well? And then so we can kind of make it a little more personal and build that personal relationship, as well as understand what's on each of our plates. Does that help?
Yeah, that's good. Those are good ideas and good techniques. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, Tyler, you have a question.
Yeah. So there's been talk about having difficulty with your team, or having people who are not quite getting the workload or things like that. But what about the opposite, where you've got you're open to change and you're open to ideas, and you've got personnel who are finding ways to say, hey, we could make this better. This will be a shift. It'll be hard when we do it, but this will ultimately make things better or easier or more right. What's the admin workload change on things like that look like?
You mean like change management, or
More like
question?
more like so you've got the reps at the bottom who are kind of doing the groundwork, and they're coming up with ideas for how to better manage that work, or ways to if you've got policy analysts, for instance, to interpret laws or changes and say, hey, I think this means this, even though we've been going with X interpretation, I think it actually means Y.
So I think managing up, how do you manage up to your leadership to say, this is no longer working. We think this idea may work and streamline our processes. Okay.
Kind of the
Yeah, I
bottom up.
definitely think that, the leadership has to set the tone as well. Like, I encourage staff to always, go against the status quo. Not everything is set in stone. When you have processes and guidelines internally, those things can be, changed and shifted. I'm not so aware of like the program laws, so I don't want to overstep Tyler on that. But from an administrative perspective, there's laws, rules, and regulations in human resources that are upheld by control agencies that we have to follow. We have no way to change any of that because the control agencies control that, right? So what we find is internally, if our processes are not streamlined, or it's that concept of working harder instead of smarter, those type of things, I encourage and set that platform for that safe space so staff can share their ideas, because I always humble myself and remind myself I was an analyst. I had the boots on the ground. I was doing that work, and just because I'm 2 to 3 steps away from it, I don't shy away from that hard work and understanding that concept. but I think leadership has to set that tone. And I think, leadership is really hard for us too, because we have to make sure we're putting our voice and our stamp of approval on things as well, because we have people to answer to. So it makes it really hard to find the balance in between. But my opinion is, I think, your leadership has to set that tone for staff to feel comfortable to share those ideas and say, no offense to what we were doing before, but I think if we can do this, it can minimize A, B, and C. So I hope your leadership's open to it, but that's just, my opinion on that.
Tyler, I love the question because I like to just flip things upside down, and like that, I think focusing on the positive is really awesome. So I'm going to shamelessly promote the OD unit. So for many of you that don't even know who we are, we're a very, very small unit within HCD. And that is exactly what our charge is. Our charge is to help your teams with process improvement, or if you have some ideas about how something can be done better, maybe we can help you out. We can give you some tools. We're here for you. And so especially anybody that if you become an SSM1 and you see something and think, hey, this could really run smoother, please reach out to us and we're happy to assist you. Now, that being said, I've also noticed over the past few years, especially as I'm seeing the budget impact, is right, everybody's low on staff. The work is always going to be there. So management has to role model the way, I think. They really have to say, okay, I understand that process improvement is going to take an investment, but it'll help us in the long run. So it's about getting management to support that argument. But if you present a good case, I think, we're there. It doesn't cost anything. It just costs time. So.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question because, we're taking a little bit longer than we expected. And if you're asking a question, that's great. But if you're putting it in the chat, unless it's related to the comment that we were talking about prior, I'm going to save it to the end. So I will get to it. So don't think I won't. And we'll just try to keep our questions on to whatever we're talking, because your answer may be coming up a little bit later. But let's see here. Okay, so our next question is, what are the biggest pain points or challenges as a manager, especially compared to not being a manager previously? So you're a new manager, what would the pain points and challenges be? I know we've kind of talked about a few of them, like workload, being a working manager, or if you have a difficulty with the staff, but is there anything else that you could share?
I'll do pain point. I see a pain point and a challenge as two different things. Pain point, progressive discipline through and through, right? It is very difficult as a manager to do your job and go through the progressive discipline process, especially if it's someone that is severely underperforming, because it impacts you and your team, right? So progressive discipline is a really big pain point, and it's really difficult for everyone, right? For the manager, for the person who is being disciplined, for the team, sometimes for the unit, sometimes for the section, sometimes for branch, right? So it can snowball really quickly. The biggest challenge to me is the flip side of that, which is appreciation and gratitude and kind of like the directors awards, right? And the Rise awards. It's very easy to tell people good job, right? And mean it. I genuinely love my team. They're great. I tell them all the time how awesome they are, and they hear it often. But that extra step of those additional recognitions is challenging. Again, I'm completely honest, right? Completely transparent. It's hard to find the time for those things. And I'm working currently on making time for those things, because we should be, as managers, right, We talk about how difficult it is when it's difficult, but when things are good, we should be prioritizing that recognition as well. And it can be challenging at times. So that's something that I'm working on myself to try to be better at, because there are only so many hours in the day and it's really hard, right, to prioritize all of the things, because if everything's important, nothing's important, right? But everything is important. So that is one. And just accountability, right? Being accountable for yourself and your teams. Some of us have fairly small teams, some of us have really big teams. And so regardless of size, accountability is sometimes challenging, right? Again, it's harder when you have underperforming staff, but just being accountable for yourself and your teams, that's a big change going into management. And so that can be challenging.
Thank you. Any additional comments, or shall we move on to the next question? I think we'll move on to the next question then. Okay. So our next question is, what are the perks and positives about being a supervisor? Is there flexibility? Is it the pay? Are there unexpected benefits? Tell us what you love about being a supervisor.
I'll take this one. I think what I enjoyed and what helped solidify my decision to become a leader, because I thought I was going to be a forever analyst, because leadership is difficult in terms of managing people, right? Or not managing, but leading people and sharing that vision. But what I enjoyed was really being able to mentor and coach staff and, you know, sharing and seeing their growth. That was a huge factor. It's kind of like looking at it like a teacher, like, you know, when the children get it and they get that assignment, the light bulb, and they get an A, it's amazing, right? It's similar to how I thought in with staff, was that, you know, I get this ability to coach and mentor and lead staff to progress in their career and, you know, help with their development. So that was a huge positive for me. The pay is not significant. I'm just going to be honest, like Chanel has been. Like the pay, I mean, if you look at it, we're civil servants, we're providing a service. We're not private sector, you know. So it's nice to have the perks, but it's not significant for me. I can only speak for myself. What I just enjoyed and loved was being in the know, being able to do the change management, be a part of effective change, you know, lead that for staff and mirroring the way for staff. Like, you know, I still am closely, you know, I talk to my previous team at Department of Rehabilitation almost every day. And that having that relationship and just building that and bringing that here to HCD with my current team, that's what keeps me thriving. That's what keeps me motivated to continue to be leader. And I challenge myself all the time to be better. I don't know everything. I don't want to be stagnant either. So like in my leadership style, I try to, you know, evolve and, you know, continue to grow myself, and showing that for others on the team. That's what I feel is the most positive.
Thank you. And Douglas, you want to add to
Yeah,
that?
just quickly, I think Melinda is spot on. I think that the pay is if you want to be a manager because of the pay, I don't think that is, you know, for state service. Maybe in the private sector, yeah, but not here. I think, you know, and being a manager is not flexible. I don't think there's any flexible, or, you know, I mean, the upside is, you know, you don't have to call in sick often, because say if you have a dentist appointment or whatever, you can use those hours. You don't have to report 8 hours, you know, like if you were like staff. So that's the one kind of like, up being a manager, right? But if you are looking for pay to move to a manager, I think that's not wise to do, because again, it's not I think less than 5% or maybe 5%, and it's not worth, you know, your time of having more responsibility, having to manage the staff, all of those things, right? So that 5% is not worth it at all, in my opinion.
Thank you. Chanel, do you want to add to that?
Just a quick add, a seat at the table, right? I think that's the biggest plus for me and management is just being able to have a seat at that decision-making table. Even if you're a fly on the wall as a one, right? As a two, as you move up, you have a little bit more ability to be a part of like the actual decision making. But being in the know, as Melinda was saying, is great. Obviously, then I'm a more is more person, right? So I share as appropriate with my staff any information that I'm able to as soon as I can, right? And that's a really nice thing to have because as a subordinate staff, when I was an analyst, I didn't always have managers that like to share. So being able to provide that to my teams is priceless. So that's kind of one of the things, along with everything else that folks have talked about, is really valuable to me as an.
Great, thank you. Okay, if there's no questions, we'll go on to the next. Where did it go? There it goes. Okay. They did it again. Okay. Our next question is, do you have any practical points to share on how to avoid or lessen your personal biases or preferences in your decision making as a supervisor? This is a good one. Anybody want to tackle it? Kind of a hard one, I think. Everybody's being quiet because they're thinking about it like,
I'll jump in. I'm just trying not to talk a lot, right? I don't want to be like I'll answer that one, right? But I think listening to all perspectives, right? Having an open ear and an open heart, if you will, right? And not only not planting seeds, but also not allowing for seeds to be planted, right? I always say that, like, I don't want to plant seeds, or I don't want people to form their own opinions, and I also don't let people plant seeds, right? I want to be able to gather and make my own decisions and form my own opinions. So that's kind of a practical kind of thing to kind of look at as far as when you're making decisions and when you're at the seats at the table is also not trying to make snap judgments, right? Really sit and think. It's kind of like when you write an email and you're really upset, right? You write it, you read it, you backspace a little bit, right? So really sitting and thinking before making those decisions, and again, just listening to all sides to make sure that you have all the information that you need to then be able to move forward.
thank you. I think Lisa wants to add to that question.
Well, I was just thinking that I think it's basically, for me, the way to battle my own personal bias, and we all have personal bias, whether we acknowledge it or not. So the way to battle that is by having a diverse team around me. And so I want people that maybe they think differently or they process differently. And then as a team, we might get together and make a decision or whatever. So I try to be aware that I need to have a diverse perspectives and everybody has a seat at the table, and that's how we try to make decisions.
I definitely think this question is broad. I don't think there's a specific way to respond to it. I agree with Chanel and Lisa. But I think it's also identifying what the scenario is, the fit the situation, and what decision has to be made. Because as leaders, we may have to make a decision fast and where we won't be able to get the buy-in, where we won't be able to get the shared ideas. So it's really assessing that, what scenario, what situation, what fits best, where you can look at it from different lanes and operate in that manner, where hopefully as a leader, if you have to make a fast decision, you're understanding the impact and you're understanding that, sometimes it's the top down approach versus the to top approach. So it could go either way, but I do think, like, transparency, like Chanel has mentioned a few times, communication, honesty, of, getting and assessing what decision as a group and having different, a diverse group. I do agree with Lisa on that, can present ideas and information differently than you could. So.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for our managers? All right, let's go on to the next question. Okay, sorry, wasn't clicking over for me. All right, what tactics are you using to show support for your reports that help them grow in their roles and in their confidence? Anybody want to tackle this one?
I can go ahead. Okay, what tactics are you using to show support for your reports that help them grow in their roles? So, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's just really supporting and creating that safe space for staff to be open and transparent with you as well, sharing their ideas. I think, when Tyler presented his question, it was, how do you manage up and how do you share, respectfully without, offending your leader or like, those type of things. I definitely feel setting that tone in the beginning with staff to let them know that it is so, like, employee engagement. I think someone else, sorry if I don't remember your name, but I think the gentleman from Codes and Standard had a question specifically for Lisa about employee engagement, right? So what I did when I first came to HCD to get to know my staff as well, because I didn't want to just know my ones, I wanted to know the analysts that were working underneath them as well. So I set up employee engagement conversations with every single staff member and, shared who I was. I wanted to know, who they were as a person. I'm not a person that pries, but I also encourage that humanistic approach of understanding, like, who you are, what your background is important, how you execute your work. I mean, just who you are as a person and understanding that you are a person first, I think is tremendous in building those working relationships. So I took time out to meet with everyone for an hour and a half. I shared details about who I was, not only work-wise, but, I love English bulldogs. And I had two of them. One unfortunately passed away, but like just sharing those details of like, really helps staff to come out of their shell and feel that, wow, I can talk to my section chief or I can talk to my, section leader or my deputy, because they put that human first, right? I'm not intimidated because they're at this level. So I've implemented that. I've encouraged, like, open conversations, social hours where we can talk about whatever's going on in the world, communicating and keeping us as a harmonious unit. Of course, training, development, mentoring with them, giving them, ability to go to certain trainings to learn a little bit more, making sure that they understand their role and responsibility, and understanding those expectations of them. So some of the things and tactics that I've used.
Thank you. Chanel, you want to add to that?
Sure. I mean, I think Melinda hit a lot of it, but I think just making sure we're listening to the ideas and encouraging innovation, right? Nothing set in stone besides like those very stringent policies that we have in place. But just thinking outside of the box, right? Continuously streamlining. I'm never the smartest person in the room, right? So if you have a bigger, better idea, I'm open to hearing it. Understanding their strengths and trying to provide opportunities for them to perform and do work that's engaging to them, right? And keeping them interested. So, there are day-to-day things that must get done, but if there are opportunities that we can give to our employees that, either leverages the strengths that they have or allows for them to continue to learn in an area that maybe isn't what exactly they were hired to do, and we can do that in a productive way, providing those opportunities encouraging training and development, making sure they carve out time in their month or their quarter, whatever that is, whatever the case may be, to continue to train, right? Make time to train and develop yourself, whether it's interpersonally or technical skills, whatever they feel they need or we need for them. Because we all have so much work all the time, meetings all the time, but training is just as important, and encouraging that training, right? Find those 4 hours or 6 hours or even full day trainings. We allow our teams to do 2 a month, but it can be up to 2 8-hour trainings, right? And so finding the time to kind of continue to develop themselves as people and employees is just as important as the day they work. Making sure they know that and they understand it.
Thank you, Chanel. Douglas?
Hey, I want to echo both Melinda and Chanel. The one thing that I've done, with all my staff, including, the rep too, is each time when I have a meeting with them, I ask them, how are you doing? How do you like your job? Do you want to learn something new? What is your, near-term, short-term goal in as far as, getting a promotion? And so, to kind of open up that dialogue with them and let them know that, I'm here to support them, whatever the decision they make in their career. Because again, once staff move up, and even yourself, when you move up, into different position, you are doing that for your family, right? You want a better pay, better benefit, or whatever the case may be. So I let them know that I'm here to support them. It doesn't matter if they have a question about a job posting that they saw, anything at all. Again, just being open, transparency, with them, open dialogue, and just, hey, be honest, and build that trust with staff. Yeah, so that's my response.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for our panel? Frank?
Hi, I would like to direct this question to Melinda. Hi, Melinda, this is Frank in Codes and Standards. And I was going to ask you if you would happen to have any techniques that you utilize to, I know in HRB, you probably face this a lot, but what do you do to prevent knowledge loss and brain drain?
Wow. That is an interesting question, Frank. Thank you. Let me see if I can clarify just so I understand how to answer that question. When you refer to brain drain, are you talking about like information overload?
Well, maybe that, but like some people leave or maybe are shifted to other units.
Gotcha.
Things like that.
So that does vary, but what we in the HR world we refer to that as the brain dump. So I understand where you're going now. So like if staff are aware that they are transitioning out of the unit, whether it be retirement, transferring to a different section of the same department, or even out of the department to a new department, what we tend to, educate from the HRB perspective is that once you're aware that somebody is separating, hopefully the leadership takes lead to provide that transition, that knowledge transfer transition of providing, what the knowledge that person has and putting it all in a safe space. Like the hub, for example, is something that I think this department uses frequently. So just making that time, but if the leadership's not always aware that somebody is separating into the last minute, it makes it really, really difficult and hard. But use the HR, and I think there's on our HCD inside page, there's onboarding and offboarding resources. We can point our leadership to start using that a little bit more and doing, trying to get as much information before that person separates, because if they're not aware in advance, it makes it very difficult to have that transition for the leadership to work with that individual to say, hey, make sure you're leaving all of this behind, making sure, or giving that flexibility of time to recruit for their replacement so that they can then do the knowledge transfer with the new staff. It's a ton of variables, Frank, and I'm sorry I don't have a direct response, but
that's okay.
I think those are some of the ideas that, leadership can start using.
Good. Thank you. How about
Lisa?
you, Chanel? How about, do you have any techniques that you utilize in your unit that maybe relate to the same question?
I think
Sure.
my answer would be very similar to Melinda's, right?
Mhm.
But again, I'm a more is more person, right? So as much information as possible. I don't like to take people by surprise ever. Again, I have been under, not here, but I have been in a previous department where management kind of held everything close to the cuff, didn't share very much at all.
Mhm.
Kind of found out the day before when things were changing, right? And
Mhm.
you didn't really have not necessarily a say, but any input, right? So if I'm going from left to right, and that's fine, but I would like to be heard and at least have, someone listen to my concerns and my kind of questions. And I didn't get that ever at my last department. So I just tried to be everything that I didn't get. And again, I try to find the lesson in everything. So what my last department showed me was the kind of manager I didn't want to be,
Mhm.
right? And so I kind of just try to model the way of everything that I wished for as an analyst, as a manager. Again, I'm not perfect. I'm not the smartest person in any room. But I try to kind of just be as open and honest and transparent as possible. And again, allow for the time for feedback and thoughts, perspectives. Sometimes I think this is easy, it's going to be fine. And then I'll talk to the staff and they'll remind me that there's 7 steps that I don't see that they have to take to do those things. And so just remembering that, it should be a conversation first before things.
I guess it would vary, depending on what unit or program you're in. I know some units have higher turnover. Other programs, people have a tendency to stay a little bit longer. So I guess it would depend. All right, thank you. Thanks.
I also wanted to say that it also depends on the size of the team. But I'm in a very small team. And we actually had that situation. So there's only 3 people with the manager. Well, the manager got promoted, somebody retired, and then somebody else got promoted. So all of a sudden, our unit was like empty.
Yeah.
And so I try to proactively at least have everybody has an outline of their steps that they do, all right, and that their procedures that they go through, but also to share things around. So you might have noticed, I guess a couple of years ago, there was only one person that always posted the connecting the dots. Now we share it all because anybody could have to go on vacation or might get sick or need to take care of their parents or whatever. So we try to share a lot of the responsibilities, and in supporting that, we build an outline, if you will, of the procedures so that we don't ever want to be stuck with that loss of historical knowledge that you were talking about, Frank.
That's good. Thank you.
Right. Chanel, do you want to add? We do need to get to the other questions, but if you quickly add to that.
I did really quickly. I think Lisa kind of triggered something for me. I think the documenting of all the processes is something that is so important. And no one wants to do it. It's not a glamorous job, right? But making sure that we have those documented processes so that the turnover, if someone retires tomorrow, we can have someone do their job, right? If there's a change in or a reorg, right? We can kind of improve and we are setting everyone up for success. So I think having those documented processes is so important.
And one of the things that we've done here in our program, we've utilized or we've put together SOPs, which is at least we'll have something in writing,
I love to hear it. I love to hear it.
And then, yeah, it'll be at least, a base, for, to solidify some of the procedures and some of the tasks that we do. So, and then we can always modify them and change them. So thank you.
Hey, thank you. Okay, so the next question is, and I gotta switch again, is what is the most important advice you can give about being an effective supervisor? Anybody like to take that? You guys are thinking about it. While you're thinking, and we can move on if you guys don't have a good answer, but Lisa just posted something in the chat about a SOP learning module, and it's on HCD Learns. So if you need a link, please let me know. Okay. What is
Answer for the effective supervisor.
what is the most important advice you can give about being an effective supervisor?
I think, especially when you're a new manager, right? Especially in a new department or a new area, listen, learn, ask questions, observe, and then if you think that there needs to be change, give it some time before you start to change things. I think that's like the most important thing coming into management, especially in a new area, but even if you are coming from a rep or an analyst into a management position, giving time for all of those things before you make change is super important because it's kind of a hit to the ego for staff when someone comes in and immediately says, I know how to do it better, right? So just making sure you're taking that time to fully absorb, listen, watch, right? Take notes and then start to slowly implement change. Don't throw everything on its head. Because as subordinate staff, you all know how that feels, right? I've been there too, where someone comes in and just like flips the table over. It's not a great feeling. So making sure that you're doing all those steps beforehand is super important, and that would be like the biggest advice that I would give to them.
Thank you, Chanel. Melinda, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's really important, Chanel. So to add to that, as well as someone new coming into this department, being here 9 months, it's really important to, like Chanel said, actively listen, get to know the department, get to know the operation of the department, get to know your staff, especially because you're coming into where, and I know there's another question that ties into this within, if you're coming from a different department, or you're like Douglas has mentioned that you're promoting up within the same team, it's going to be hard because, staff may feel like Chanel mentioned that, you're coming in, you're making all these changes, you're telling us that it wasn't good enough or it didn't work before. And I've noticed like some leaders too, they tend to make change that fits their need or their agenda or their objective, or because the work makes sense for them. So it's a way to ease their tension as a new leader, right? But it's not effective. I would agree with Chanel that, sit, actively listen, know your operation. Like what I did when I started here, I went on HCD links through every section of what I can learn, absorb, be a sponge. Work with your staff, get to know them. Like I said, get to know the process, the operation, understand, one of the things here that I noticed too, I'm a big, if you can't tell, I'm a big communicator. And so I love conversation and I love interacting and collaborating. And, some of the things that I'm missing here that I got at DOR is some of that is missing, but I know what HCD is moving towards and trying to open that. That's exciting for me too, as a leader in this department is, like Chanel mentioned before, is having that seat at that table to impact positive change. So I think, slow your roll, but we all have expectations too. We all answer to someone else. So if your leader above you is telling you to make change, it's going to make it hard, right? So the best advice at that point, if that situation occurs, is be transparent with your staff and just remind them, this is not about you. This is top-down approach. This is what the expectation is coming from the top. This is, what we're going to have to do, but maybe we can find ways to manage up and share ideas as much as possible, right? So supporting that and letting them know that you as their leader will speak up for them and be an advocate and a voice, I think is important too.
Thank you, Melinda. We actually have some of the panel putting messages in the chat. So if you don't have the chat open, you probably want to do that because there are some great additional tips on there. All right, let's get to our next question, which is this the one we just, yeah, this is the one we just did, sorry. And the next question is, what is the best advice coming in as a supervisor of a new department or division where the existing employees know more than you do about their area? Interesting question.
I can take this one because that's
Okay.
actually happened to me maybe 9 months ago. Okay.
Great, thank you.
So just kind of quick background, you know, I came from program, right? So DSFA and DFFA is where I started my career here at HCD. So I know a lot about program, know for cycle, all of those things, right? And then 9 months ago, I got promoted to from a specialist 2 to a SSM 2 into the fair housing tribal affair unit, right? I know a lot about tribal affair, but not so much about fair housing, right? So the one thing that it can tie back to the thing that Chanel said earlier is to listen and learn. I think listen and learn to your new team member and acknowledge their expertise. I think that's the one thing I make it very, very clear early on with my fair housing staff that, hey, I'm going to learn a lot from you guys. I want to learn from what you have gone through in the past, say, 5-7 years, because that is not my expertise. Fair housing is not my thing. So yeah, just to let them know that, because you cannot, as a new manager into you know, a program or something that you are not an expert, you cannot instruct them or demand them or tell them, hey, I want these things to be completed a certain way, right? So I automatically reach out and acknowledge the expertise, listen and learn, and support them whatever resources they need, and work alongside with them in every single project. So far, you know, we've been successful that, you know, I've learned a lot, you know, throughout the past 8-9 months. So yeah, that's my response.
Thank you. Any additional comments or any questions from the participants? Frank asked, do you ask your team and fellow managers for feedback on how to better handle difficult situations? Anybody?
Can I answer that real quick?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Lisa. Sorry.
So no, I think we're all talkers. So that's what Frank, absolutely. I was just thinking as Douglas was talking before, the older we get, the more mature we get, the more we realize we don't have the answers to everything. So absolutely, you know, ensuring privacy, of course, and you know, anonymity, but that is the number one thing. And that's why I had said at the very beginning of this conversation, especially when we are all working remotely, it's those relationships that you can build across the department in other divisions, whether it's being on an ERG committee or attending other trainings or whatever, building those other relationships that you have, because you never know, you might say, oh, hey, I've got a fair housing question. I know Douglas over there. I'm going to ask him. And that's my response.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have a couple questions left, so I'm gonna try to get to those, but I want to save some time for your guys' questions. So I'm gonna we'll kind of try to rush through at least one more question, and then if we need to, we can skip ahead to the questions that for the participants. Sorry. Okay, so I could probably answer this question. What resources are available for supervisors and managers to get the help to help them in their roles? Anybody want to answer this one?
I think leveraging your live resources, right? So existing leadership, I mean, obviously your teams as well. But reaching out to your fellow managers, section chiefs, branch chiefs, whatever level you're at, and really understanding from their perspective, your area is a really, really good resource. HR, transactions, medical management, recruitments, even PeopleSoft, like they are amazing resources. They're super responsive and they are always, always, always willing to help you. So never ever hesitate to ask HR when you're either have concerns or questions or whatever. Like they've been really, really great and helpful for me. I've been a manager for a really long time for a state, and I still have questions. And they are super helpful here. We know we have trainings, right? We have the HCD Learns trainings, we have CalHR, we have CPS, whether it's technical, interpersonal, management, whatever you want, it's available somewhere. And so just going and making sure that you're taking those trainings and looking up those trainings. Deanna's been really good at helping me find some for myself and for others, right? So leveraging our training unit as well.
Thank you. And I knew Melinda was going to want to say something because I think HR is a huge part of the resources that are available. So Melinda.
Yes, thanks Chanel for the shout out for HRB. Yes, human resources branch, we're very informational and education based. But I do want to point out that when you do get into a leadership role, you'll go through an 80-hour mandatory training set with CalHR. That 80 hours will go over. Hopefully, I mean, I've never taken the one with CalHR. I was fortunate to take the one with Sac State, but that training will go over a lot of the admin functions of a supervisor, the leadership, competencies that you should have to follow through. And then you'll go every 2 years, biannually, 20 hours additional leadership. So you're never going to be at a loss, but some of the things that helped me through situations, because I think sometimes this, for me, I'm taking this question as, once you get in there, are you just never going to, are you going to sink or swim? I was in situations where, you're never going to know the answer until you go through it and have that experience. So all of the training, all of the resources are great to have, but it's that true on-the-job experience that is really going to give you the most resourcefulness and experience, to go through. So like I read a ton of books. I've gone to a lot of leadership training, do the TED Talks, of course, but I also engage in like, shows and movies. I know this sounds weird, but that have a strong leadership component to it that I can take and learn, to adapt my style. Because I think one of the questions in the chat was something about our leadership philosophy or our style. That evolves all the time. I think, you can hone in on a style, but you also have to be open to be adaptive, and evolve throughout. And, but human resources, yes, we have a lot of good education and resources on the hiring process, on, medical management, when staff are dealing with difficult situations, how to address it with FMLA, send them, EAP is a good resource in the state that everyone has. I forgot what EAP stands for, but I think that's one thing about the state is that, there's a lot of supportive resources.
Sorry, I was typing in the chat that it's the Employee Assistance Program. So, Frank, did you have a question?
Yes, this question can be directed for anyone who may want to answer this question, either Lisa, Chanel, Douglas, or Melinda. But what tools or techniques do you utilize in developing your interpersonal skills? I know as a manager, you're always, it's like a continuous improvement. What do you use to enhance your interpersonal skills?
So there are trainings that kind of come up I'm sure you all see kind of those trainings that the training unit sends once in a while. I try to attend those as much as possible. I've taken a lot of interpersonal courses over my time as a manager and as an analyst. I've found the DEI trainings to be really helpful too, because it kind of, again, perspective, right? Opens your eyes to things. It's really hard to see past your own nose, as they say, right? So I try to just keep myself as engaged as possible. And these trainings are priceless, right? We have so much opportunity to utilize the trainings that we have with the state. Private sector, you know, we just don't have it. We have student assistants in our division in PFFA, and I encourage them to leverage those trainings as well, because again, they have a very special window into civil service that other folks don't have. And so encouraging them to take the training too, but I try to take as much of the interpersonal. I'm not saying I know how to do my job great, and so I don't need the technical stuff. But again, learning more about myself as I get older is helping kind of inform the way that I manage and the way that I kind of move forward in my career. So I do prioritize the interpersonal things, but we have a ton of good training on HCD learns that is super.
Good, thank you.
Okay, so let's now start putting questions out for the participants can ask. I do want, Melinda sort of answered it for her, but Charlotte had asked early on to describe your management philosophy. Does anybody else want to describe theirs quickly?
Jump in on that one. So there's a management philosophy called servant leadership, and it's about me serving others. And so I'm serving the people that report to me. I'm going to be a success if they are a success. That's how I look at it. I need to lift them up, and then we're all a success. And I feel the same way about the people that report that are managing me. If I can be a success, I'm a success if I make them look good, if I can help them achieve their goals. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Thank you. Okay, does anybody else want to answer, or do we have any questions? Again, you can put it in the chat. We have 11 minutes left, so I want to end it with you guys asking the questions that you want answered. Kelsey.
So Doug kind of hit on this a little bit when he was talking about promoting within a team that you were a part of, but I was wondering if any of you have advice for managing a team where maybe other members had applied for that position and that now you're in the role of being their manager, because it is kind of a tricky thing to navigate.
I can answer that. I think Douglas could also. But I have experienced that a couple of times in my career. And I think it's just being able to be honest and be open, and to allow folks to feel what they're feeling, right? I think when any of us go and apply for a job, we think we're the best person for it. And so when we don't get that job, it sucks, right? So allowing the space to have that person or those people feel that and letting them know that you understand, but also how do we move forward, right? How do we set expectations for me, for you? What can I do for you? Is there anything? Do you need time? Do you need space? Do you just need me to leave you alone for a week or two, right? Just being honest on how that person is feeling and creating that safe space for them to be able to tell you that, right? It's hard if you don't know folks that well. I try to cultivate an environment where everyone feels safe and everyone feels open and can be honest. But I think just letting people sit in that space of feeling uncomfortable, but how do we move forward, right? Together. It's never a me versus you or us versus them. You know, we're all on the same team here. So just finding that space for that.
Thank you. Melinda, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Chanel hit some points, but also, be the coach for them. I mean, it really is about not knowing the feedback they've received from the hiring manager, obviously, but just being open and receptive to that, maybe you can be the one to coach and lead them to get them to that next level. And of course, the employee themselves, they have to be coachable too. They have to be open and receptive to have constructive feedback, to understand that, it's not a poor reflection of you. It is a competitive process. And so, but help them see that, if they are interested in wanting to get to that next level, taking that feedback and building that course of mentorship for them, right? So some things to consider.
Thank you, Melinda. We have quite a few hands up, but there's also some questions in the chat, and while maybe I'm asked, the questions are being answered for the people that have their hands raised. If any of the managers want to write in the chat any answers to those questions, that would be great. Don't feel obligated, but if you have time and you want to do that, just in case, I want to make sure everybody gets their question answered. Enrique, you were next. You have a question.
I do. First of all, thank you all for being here. I think all of us greatly appreciate it. My question is you've all talked about creating a good team so that you can have that work-life balance so that you are a successful manager. How do you go about that? I know there's hiring practices, but when you get promoted into a unit or a level where you already have the team built, how do you go about creating that hardworking team for yourself?
I can take that if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, so thank you for your question, Enrique. I think I think it's going to be hard, right? But again, I think that like a lot of us have been saying is that have that open communication, right? From the get-go, when you start a new team, when you lead a new team, communicate with your team, right? And I think Chanel had mentioned earlier, don't go in and try to change everything. Don't go in and say, hey, all the process here have been done is useless. It's my way or the highway, right? I think when you go in, be open-minded, adaptable to your team, right? And seek feedback from your team, right? Because as a leader, you don't always have to be like, I'm the leader, you are the follower, you need to listen to me. I think, for me, I work with my team 99.9%, I make the decision based on my team feedback. And it doesn't matter what kind of feedback it is. I always get, hey, let's make this decision together. Give me your ideas, give me your recommendation, and let's make the decision together, right? We train together, we present together, and every single presentation in fair housing, I was part of the presenter. And I never like, hey, pick and choose what I want to present. I want to work with my team, and we kind of divide up the presentation equally to each of us. And I was willing to participate in every single presentation, right? So, again, open-minded, adaptable. Don't go and make change right away, right? Take time, talk to them, communicate with them. And in my opinion, that's how you build your new team, and of course, the building trust as well.
Thank you. Tyler, you had a question.
Yeah, so it's the question I also put in the chat here, which was just, what are some of the positive impacts that you've seen from your particular management style and the impacts that it has had on those who report to you? And is there anything on that same token, is there any parts of that management style that you've seen that maybe need some work?
I can take that one real quick because that's kind of in my mind as well. So when I came to fair housing, and I can touch to a lot of things that we've been talking about, many of the people that reported to me actually went for the same position, right? But I got the job. So initially there was a lot of resistance, a lot of, and I was able to communicate, be flexible with them, share, the idea, acknowledge their expertise, and also coach them for them to also move on, right? Like move to the next career or wherever they wanted to be. So since I've been with Fair Housing in the past 9 months, 3 of my staff have already been promoted to an SSM2, to specialist 2 elsewhere, right? So again, having that coaching, mentoring them, have that open communication with them about what their short-term goal is very important. And that allow them to come to you, but at the same time, you supporting them to make the next move in their career.
Thank you. All right, we have one more hand up, so let's get that answered. I think will be our last question. Christian, what would you like to ask? You're on mute. Uh-oh, you know what? I don't know if you have sound. Let me look. Says you do, but we're not hearing you. So do you want to type it in the chat? Is it too long? Okay, type it in the chat. And then if any questions weren't answered, maybe I'll ask the managers to write it out, and I'll email it to everybody. Because we have 2 minutes left, so I don't know how long. Sometimes it takes a while to type a question in. So while we're waiting, does anybody want to add anything? Let's see if there was a question that I think the micromanager question was the other one that was in there.
Let's see, Christian question, how do you measure success in your role, and what metrics do you find most important? I can touch on that a bit. And I know
Yeah, thank you.
So I think I put in the chat for Douglas, right? Our staff success is our success, right? Our job is to develop our teams, our subordinate staff and our managers. I just recently had Tressa Mattingly, who was an SSM1 for me. She promoted outside of our department to a manager too. And that's exciting. I've had so many folks that have worked under me promote up and out or up and over. Gabby Sorba in budgets, or sorry, in FMB, she used to be my SSM1, right? And now she is a branch chief. So that's how I measure it, and helping my folks grow, develop and grow. And then just within the teams, right? A harmonious team is a happy, productive team, right? So trying to encourage folks to talk to each other, meet often, to be able to move things along. Ours is operations and support services. So making sure everyone is productive and doing their job, but is also engaged, right? And is feeling seen and heard, right? Having a few minutes in each of the team meetings to just talk about things, whether it's an icebreaker or what's going on in everybody's lives. So all of those things for me as a manager, kind of, that's how I measure the success of myself and my team.
Thank you, Chanel. Well, we're at the 11:30 mark, so I don't want to keep anybody. I know it's close to lunchtime. I do want to thank our panel members for being so willing to share their experiences. Douglas, Melinda, Chanel, and Lisa, thank you again. Thank you to the participants for being here and asking some great questions. And congratulations to most of you, because I think most of you have completed all the classes, and we'll have a graduation in a couple of weeks. So thank you for that. And I don't think there's anything else for me to add. So you guys are welcome to go, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.